Science and Technology, and this is grade 6. Under our lesson or learning area of Science and Technology grade 6, we are going to look at the strand of animals. And under animals, we shall be looking thoroughly today at characteristics of invertebrates. Characteristics of invertebrates. So welcome to today's lesson. Let's move together, enjoy, and get the knowledge and skills in our lesson today. Now, in our lesson, what are our expectations as we look at animals and more specifically characteristics of invertebrates? The expectations are that by the end of this lesson, we should be able to, 1, define characteristics of define invertebrates. 1, we should be able to define what invertebrates are. And number 2, list the characteristics of invertebrates. So, number 1, we shall define invertebrates. Then thereafter, we should be able to list the characteristics of these invertebrates as at the level of our grade 6. Feel welcome. Let's move together and make sure you get the point. For us to look at this topic of animals in grade 6, I would like us to remind ourselves what did we learn in this topic of animals, because we started with it in grade 1. But more importantly for today, I want us to remind ourselves what we did in grade 5 in the topic of animals. In grade 5, just a quick going through it quickly. In grade 5, under the strand of animals, we were able to look at substrand vertebrates. And we defined vertebrates as animals with backbone. Vertebrates are animals with backbones. And what is this backbone? Backbones, or a backbone, this is the bone among the bones in our body, and specifically backbone is the bone that makes us to do a lot of things like standing upright, being strong, or being upright in most of the animals. For instance, when you look at, let's say, like a cow, if you look at the back of a cow, there's that bone that runs on top of the back of the cow. That is what is referred to as backbone. And among we human beings, people, where is the backbone? Because people are also among vertebrates, and therefore human beings or people like me and you, we have a backbone. During a free time, you can check with your friend, with your brother, or with your sister. Look behind here, the neck. If you look from the neck running down towards the lower down, you can see that there is a bone, and that is what is referred to as a backbone. Therefore, I repeat, vertebrates are animals with backbones. And again, in grade 5, we learned that vertebrates are divided into 5 groups. We can say 5 groups, we can say 5 classes, or 5 categories. That is the grouping or classification of vertebrates. And the first category of vertebrates, as we did in grade 5, are mammals. Examples of mammals are like cows, goats, lions, and elephants, among others. That's the first category of vertebrates, which is mammals. Then after mammals, we have the second category of vertebrates. So the first one is mammals. The second one is birds. Example of birds, we have the duck, we have the dove, we have the turkey, and we have the hens. Those are examples of birds. Category number 3 of vertebrates, as we learned in grade 5, is the fish. And example of fish, we have tilapia and many others like trouts, which are commonly known as omena. We have others like mudfish. So the first category we said mammals. The second one we've talked of birds. Then number 3, we have talked of fish. Group or class number 4 of vertebrates is made up of what is called reptiles. Reptiles is the fourth group or category. And what are these examples of reptiles? We have the snake is a reptile. We have the crocodile as another example of reptiles, and lizards, among many others that when we check in our textbooks, we have we can add like a tortoise and turtle. They also fall in the group of reptiles. Then last but not least, in the group of vertebrates, the last category is made up of amphibians. And examples of amphibians are frogs, toad, and salamander. Now those are the 5 categories or groups or classes of vertebrates that we learned in grade 5. Mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. Now, having known that of what we looked at in grade 5, we now come to our grade 6 work. We have now known what vertebrates are. We now come to our today's substrand, invertebrates. And now, what are invertebrates? What do we mean by invertebrates? And remember we said vertebrates are animals with backbones. Then invertebrates, unlike vertebrates, invertebrates means animals without backbones. And we said backbones are the bones, among the bones found in our body, and backbones help our body to be strong. Backbone is what makes us, or what makes like me, to stand upright. So there are those animals without backbones. And this means these animals cannot stand upright because they do not have that backbone. These animals without backbones are the ones which are referred to as invertebrates. And because they do not have backbones, again, these animals can be bent, can be turned, can be coiled to have a shape like a circle. But it is not very easy to bend a human being, a person like me, or to bend an animal in a circular manner to form a circle or to form a wavy line like a zigzag. If you try to do that, you can easily hurt or injure that animal. Why? Because this animal has a backbone. But for invertebrates, what we are looking at today, as I've said, these are animals without backbones. And you can easily, without hurting them, bend or coil them to make a circular or a round shape. So those are what we refer to as invertebrates. Therefore, if you are asked to define what invertebrate is, invertebrate means animals without backbones. Then after that, having known what invertebrate means, animals without backbones, we shall be looking at the characteristics of invertebrates. And because we've seen examples of vertebrates and their groups, let's all look at examples of these animals that are called invertebrates. Let's look at them and know which ones they are. Invertebrates, the animals without backbones. As we can see, we have their diagram. We have an ant is the first example of an invertebrate. We can also see a butterfly. A butterfly does not have a bone in its body, and so it is also called an invertebrate. Number 3, we have a grasshopper that forms part of the invertebrate. We have a wasp, and these wasps are found in our houses. When you see a wasp, remember it is an invertebrate. Below the wasp, we have a mosquito, and a mosquito is also an invertebrate because when you take a mosquito and you kill it, you cannot find any bone. That's why we say they do not have bones. They do not have backbone. Apart from the mosquito, we also have a millipede. A millipede is also an invertebrate because similarly it does not have a backbone. We have a crab, followed by a spider, and then a snail. These are examples of invertebrates. I've not mentioned all of them. I've not given photos or diagrams of all of them, but I've given some of them. And we can take our time and find out, and whichever animal you get and does not have a bone or a backbone, remember that such animal is called an invertebrate. Now, just as we grouped or classified vertebrates into 5 classes or groups, invertebrates are also put into different groups, and that is why we have their characteristics. These characteristics are common features between groups of animals. And when some animals have similar features, maybe let's say they all have hands or they all have heads, then they are put in one group. Therefore, invertebrates are also put into 4 different groups, depending on the features that each of the groups has. Now, in which groups are these invertebrates put? They are put in 4 groups. Let's see all the groups. Group number 1 of invertebrates, or category number 1, is what is referred to as insects. The first group of invertebrates is the insects. And we shall look at characteristics of insects. We shall see, why do we call this an insect? Why do we call this an insect? Why do we call this an insect? Those features, you will see that whichever animals are called insects, they all in that group have the same characteristics or the same features, and that's why they're called insects. The second group after insects is what is referred to as spiders. And ticks. The second group of invertebrates, we say the first group is insects. Then the second group is spiders and ticks. Then group number 3, we have snails. And slugs. Snails and slugs. Then the last group is called centipede. Centipede and millipede. Centipedes and millipedes. So these are the 4 categories or groups of invertebrates. The first one, insects. And we have some examples of insects there. We can see like a housefly, a mosquito, and cockroaches. Those are some of the animals. Remember, not all. They are some of the animals that follow under the group of insects. All these insects do not have a bone. And if you want to confirm, because under science and technology, we use our technology to look for some scientific proof or to get our science facts that truly these animals, like insects, they do not have a bone. It's not very difficult to find a housefly or to find a butterfly. Once you get into one, as a scientist, as an upcoming scientist, kill it and see, can you find any bone? For example, when you kill or when you slaughter a cow, you will find bones. When you slaughter a hen, you will find some bones because they have the backbone. But insects, take a housefly, they do not have any bone. If you kill a spider or a tick, ticks are found mostly on our domestic animals. If you get a tick and you kill it, you will not find any single bone. Therefore, ticks and spiders form our second category of invertebrates. Number 3, we have snails and slugs. Also, they are commonly found, especially in our rural areas. You can come across a snail and a slug. Once you kill them, you will not find any bone. And if they do not have any bone, then definitely it means they do not have a backbone. And somebody may ask, what's the difference between a snail and a slug? They are the same except for the fact that a snail has a shell on its back. Wherever a snail goes, it carries a shell on its back, and the work of the shell is to help the snail to protect itself in case it sees any danger. So if you see such animal with a shell, it is called a snail, and that one without a shell is called a slug. Then finally we have the centipede and the millipede. If you get them, millipedes are very common, more common than centipedes. If you get a millipede or a centipede and you kill any of them, I'm sure and be rest assured that you will not get any bone. And that is why it is called the centipede or the millipede. It forms or falls under category of animals called invertebrates. That is animal without a backbone. Now, having got these four categories or 4 groups of invertebrates, let's move and see the characteristics of each of them to explain why do we put some animals like a bee, a housefly, a butterfly, a tick, an ant. Why do we put them in the group of insects? And why don't we say a butterfly falls in the group of spiders and ticks? Or why can't we say ticks fall in the group of snails? Or why can't we say ticks fall in the group of centipedes and millipedes? Or ticks fall in the group of insects? Remember, as I stated, I said, these animals are categorized depending on the features or the things that they have in their bodies. And these features or things they have in their bodies I said, for example, like I have my hands, I have my head, I have ears, I can walk, I can talk, I have bones in my body, including the backbone. So there are things that make these animals to be put in their different categories. Now let's look at the first group of animals under invertebrates. These are the ones that are called insects. If somebody asks you to give the characteristics of insects, these are the features that these insects have, what will you say? If somebody gives you a diagram or gives you a real animal and tells you this is an invertebrate, under which category does it fall? Or prove that this is an insect. Their characteristics are very simple. Number one, all insects, any animal that falls under the category of insects, must have 3 pairs of legs. And 3 pairs of legs, the word pair means 2. So 3 pairs of legs, it means they have a total of 6 legs. As we can see on our diagram, we can count. That is an example of an insect, most likely a bee. It has 3 pairs of legs or 6 legs. Characteristic number 2. All insects have 3 body parts. And which 3 body parts are these? The first one is the head. And from a diagram we can see where the head is. That's the first part, the head. And the head hosts the eyes and some other things that we shall look at as the following characteristic. So the 3 parts are the head. Then we have the middle part of an insect, which is called the thorax. Then the last part is the abdomen. So an insect is divided into 3 parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Characteristic number 3 of insects is that all insects have feelers or antenna. An antenna or a feeler is used to feel or to sense. We can see on the head, apart from the eyes on the head, apart from the eyes of an insect, we also have the antenna. The antenna is also called the feelers. It acts as the aerial. It gets some senses used for sensing or feeling. Characteristic number 4, most insects, and remember I'm saying most, not all. Most insects have 2 pairs of wings. Remember, for the legs it was 3 pairs, but for the wings it is 2 pairs of wings, meaning 4 wings. 2 wings on one side, 2 wings on the other side. So most insects have 2 pairs of wings, and not all. For example, you have an insect like the beetle, the louse, the plural is lice, and you have the ant. Those 3 insects, among some few others, do not have wings, but they have 3 body parts, they have 3 pairs of legs. So they have antenna. They are called insects, despite the fact that they do not have wings. So their last point, or their last characteristic of insects, we say that insects have an outer hard covering. The outer covering of an insect, which looks like a skin, but it's not a skin. It is the outer covering which acts as the skin, but it is hard, a bit hard, almost like a skin, which is called exoskeleton. So all insects have an outer hard covering, or an hard outer covering part, which looks like the skin, and it is called exoskeleton. Having known those 5 characteristics, let's go through them again. Number one, they have 3 body parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They have 3 pairs of legs. They have 2 pairs of wings. They have hard outer covering part called the exoskeleton, and most of them have 2 pairs of wings. That makes what is called insects. And when asked about the characteristics of insects, when you give those 5 characteristics, then you are good to go. And you can know what an insect is. You can differentiate an insect from any other group of animals or invertebrates. After insects, and before we move to the other one, we have some few photos of insects. These are animals, invertebrates, which are insects, and they are not in other groups like snails and spiders. We saw the first diagram where we had all invertebrates, but here we have a few where we have insects. Where we can see, let's look at that slide, where we have insects so that we see, is there any insect that does not have wings? Look at the first one, a louse. The plural is lice. A louse does not have wings, but it has 3 body parts, it has 3 pairs of legs, it has antenna, and it has that hard out covering layer, which I've said is called exoskeleton. We also have a beetle. That's the one below the mosquito. We have louse, mosquito at the middle, and then beetle down. The beetle also does not have wings, but it forms part of the insect. We also have the termite. Okay, the termite has wings, but ants, which are associated with termites, do not have wings. So ants, beetles, louse do not have wings, but they fall under the category of insects. Those are the few examples of insects that we have there. You can add as many as you can. You can add butterfly. You can add many others that fall under the group of insects. After that, let's move to the second one, the second group of invertebrates. And our second group is formed of the spider and the ticks. Spiders and the ticks. Now, what are the characteristics of spiders and ticks? Let's look at them and we try to differentiate the characteristics or the features between the insects and the spiders. We look at the same things, the same features. Under spiders, characteristics: 1, the body of a spider or a tick is divided into 2 parts. And which are these 2 parts? The head and the abdomen. Yes, you can see there we have a diagram of a tick. The body is divided into 2 parts, the head and the abdomen. Remember, in insects, it was 3 parts. Here we have only 2 parts, the head and the abdomen. Then, how many pairs of legs? Spiders and ticks have 4 pairs of legs, and remember, a pair means 2. So when I say 4 pairs of legs, it means a total of 8 legs. All spiders and ticks, they fall in the same category of spiders and ticks, and they have 4 pairs of legs. Apart from the 4 pairs of legs, spiders and tick do not have wings. We can see from a diagram. And when you get a spider, because spiders are also found in some of our homes, there's no single day you will see a spider or a tick with wings. Then finally, under our level of grade 6, the last characteristic of spiders and ticks is that they do not have an antenna. They do not have the feelers. unlike the insects. In summary, for the spiders and characteristics, in spiders and ticks, the characteristics are 4. Number 1, they have 2 body parts, as we can see, the head and the abdomen. They have 4 pairs of legs. That is a total of 8 legs. You can count from your diagram. They do not have wings. Therefore, when a teacher tells you to draw a spider, do not make a mistake of drawing a spider and then you include wings. Spiders and ticks do not have wings. Finally, they do not have an antenna or feelers. And that brings us to the end of our second class, or our second group of invertebrates, spiders and ticks. After finishing that one, we move straight to category number 3, or to group number 3, which is snails and slugs. Why can't we group snails and slugs in the same category as spider, or in the same category as insects? What is this that is so special on snails and slugs that misses in the other categories? Why do we put snail and slugs in one group of their own called snails and slugs? The first thing, snails and slugs, their characteristics. They have a soft body. And you can see from our diagram, their bodies are very soft. And also, I had said earlier, the difference between a snail and a slug, they're almost the same. But the difference is that a snail usually has a shell on its back. Otherwise, all the other things are nearly the same. That's the only difference, a snail and a slug. Number 1, so we said under characteristics that the body of a snail or a slug is very soft. The number 2, apart from the softness of the body, snails and slugs do not have wings. Look at the diagram. Can you see any wings there? Definitely no. Therefore, snails and slugs, characteristic number 2, they do not have any wings. Characteristic number 3, all snails and slugs have feelers. We can see from our diagram, we can see the feelers, and the feelers insects, we called them feelers or antennae. Here, under slugs and snails, they are called feelers. They are also used for feeling as a sense organ. And they are also called receptacles because they receive some senses. Snails and slugs have feelers, and another name for the feelers of snails and slugs is. Then the final characteristic of snails and slugs is about their movement. Remember, insects have legs. Spiders and wings have legs. What about snails? From our diagram, do we see any legs? So that maybe we say it has 1 pair or 2 pairs or 3 pairs or 4 pairs of legs? No. Snails and slugs do not have legs. Instead, they have a muscular foot, or foot-like. They have a muscular foot that helps them to move by crawling. So snails and slugs crawl using their muscular foot, and they crawl on slimy mucus. They produce something like mucus on which they crawl. And if there's not that slimy mucus that makes them like to slide as they move, then the snails will not be able to move. Instead, they'll get a lot of injuries. Therefore, they move by crawling on slimy mucus. Just to sum on snails and slugs are their characteristics. Number one, we've said they have a soft body. All snails and slugs have a soft body. Then, number two, all snails and slugs do not have wings. And also they do not have legs. Then, how do they move? They move through crawling through slimy mucus. Then, snails and slugs also have feelers. And these feelers are also referred to as receptacles. Finally, snails and slugs do not have wings. Those are the four characteristics of snails and slugs. Therefore, this means if somebody asks you to name the four characteristics of snails and slugs, then you are sure you can list those characteristics. Finally, but last but not least, we come to our last category of our invertebrates. And what is this, our fourth category, the last one? It is made up of centipede and millipede. Our final class, group or category is centipede and millipede. We want to look at them, and at times it confuses people. People do not know, most people do not know the difference between a centipede and a millipede. But to differentiate, apart from the other characteristics, we can get the difference from their names, centipede and millipede. Centipede, from the word cent, cent means 100. Cent means 100. And milli means 1,000. So between 100 and 1,000, which one is a bigger number? Definitely 1,000 is bigger than 100. What does that mean? This one is more than this in terms of legs. So centipedes have fewer legs than millipedes. In case you get confused, centipedes, from the word cent, cent means 100, milli means 1,000. Centipedes has fewer legs than millipedes. That will help you to differentiate a centipede from millipedes. Now let's look at the other characteristics that make us to say centipedes and millipedes fall in their own category, which is different from that of the other three. Category number one. The centipede and millipede has its body, or they have their bodies divided into two main parts. Centipedes and millipedes have their bodies divided into two main parts. And which are these two main parts? Remember, also in spiders, we say that spiders and ticks, they have their bodies divided into two main parts. That is head and abdomen. But in centipedes and millipedes, their bodies are divided into two main parts, which are the head and the trunk. The head and the trunk. And the trunk of a centipede or millipede. The trunk of the centipede or millipede, as we can see on our diagram, is also divided into many other small parts. And these small parts are called segments. So the trunk of a centipede or a millipede is divided into many small parts, which are called segments. So remember that one. The body is divided into two parts, head and trunk. And the trunk is divided into very many small parts called segments. The other characteristic comes in the parts of legs. For insects, we say insects has 3 pairs of legs. Spiders and ticks have 4 pairs of legs. slugs and snails do not have legs, but centipedes and millipedes have many pairs of legs. And I differentiated. I said centipedes has fewer legs than millipedes, or millipedes has more legs than centipedes. Now, how do we differentiate the number of legs again, apart from being very many number of legs? Under centipede, we have a pair of legs per segment. And a pair of legs means on this one side we have one leg per segment, on this other side we have one leg. So for the centipede, each segment carries a pair of a leg. While in millipedes, each segment carries two pairs of legs, meaning that under millipedes, one segment of a millipede has four legs. On one side, the right side, two legs on the same segment, and on the left side, two legs. Therefore, a total of four legs in each segment of the millipede. And here, remember, one pair of legs, two pairs of legs per segment. And that makes millipedes to have more legs than centipedes. Now, after knowing that, let's quickly go through these and remind ourselves the characteristics of centipedes and millipedes. Characteristics of centipedes and millipedes. Number one, we've said that the body of centipedes and millipedes is divided into two parts. That is the head and the trunk. The body of the centipedes is divided into two parts, the head and the trunk. And the trunk is also divided into many small parts, which are called segments. The body of a centipede or a millipede is divided into two parts, head and trunk divided into many parts called trunks. It is on these trunks of centipede and millipede that we have legs. And under centipede, the centipedes have a pair of legs per segment, while the millipede has two pairs of legs per segment. Therefore, if you are asked to give the characteristics of any of these invertebrates, will you be able to get? We shall start again to go through each of them quickly and see the characteristics so that you are sure when you are asked. We've started by defining what invertebrate is, which now when you're asked, define what an invertebrate is, you should be able, as we have said, invertebrates are animals, and that simply means when you get any invertebrate, you cannot get any bone when you kill or when you dissect a body of an invertebrate. You will not get a single bone. Therefore, they do not have backbones. Those are invertebrates. After that, we've looked at the categories or the groups or the classes of invertebrates. And we've said invertebrates are put into four groups or four classes or four categories. And these categories or groups or classes are, number one, insects. Number two, spiders and ticks. Number three, snails and slugs. And number four, the last group under invertebrates, is centipedes and millipedes. Those are the 4 groups in case you are asked anywhere. Maybe somebody asks you, maybe a teacher asks you, your friend asks you. Those are the 4 groups. Then we come to characteristics of each of them. And we start with insects. When we start with insects, we've given 5 characteristics of insects. Under insects, we have 5 characteristics. Under spiders and ticks, we have 4 characteristics at our level of grade 6. So make sure here under insects, you have 5 characteristics. Under spiders, ensure you know the 4 characteristics, unless you want to add yours, which will be correct. Under snails and slugs, we also have 4 characteristics, which is similar to centipedes and millipedes. Now, under insects, we started by looking at how many body parts that an insect has. We have 3 body parts: the head, thorax, and abdomen. We looked at the number of legs and said all insects have 3 pairs of legs. Characteristic number 3, we said, we say that they have, most of them have 2 pairs of wings. Then we've said also they have a hard outer covering layer, which is called exoskeleton. And finally, they have a pair of antennae. When we came to spiders and ticks, we said they have 2 body parts. Then they have 4 pairs of legs. They do not have wings. That is for the spiders and ticks. When we came to snails and slugs, we say that number 1, snails and slugs have a soft body. They do not have legs. Also, snails and slugs do not have wings. And we saw in our diagram that snails and slugs do not have wings. And how do they move? They do not have legs. They do not have wings. They have a muscular foot. And they use this muscular foot to crawl on slimy mucus that they produce. Finally, we've come and looked at the centipede and the millipede. The centipede and millipedes, the first characteristics is that their body is divided into 2 parts, which is the head and the trunk. And the trunk is also divided into small parts called segments. It is in these segments where we have pairs of legs. Under centipede, 1 pair of leg per segment, and under millipede, 2 pairs of legs per segment. Therefore, that brings us to the end, knowing what invertebrate is, knowing the categories of invertebrates, knowing examples, and the characteristics of each category of invertebrates. Hope that one now makes us sure of this topic to be able to handle it when whichever any question